all so much for coming today. It's a great crowd and a very, very important topic here in our region with water. And so thanks for your interest and your willingness to come out and be educated and hear from especially ADWR today. So the format, well, wait, before I do that, my name is Greg Mingarelli. I'm the mayor of the city of Prescott. If you're an elected, would you stand up or wave if you're an elected official here today? Identify yourself. Those are the targets. There you go. I want to be in good company. Thank you all for coming. I'm not going to take the time to introduce everybody, but thank you all for coming. I know there's representation from all the municipalities here, and we very much appreciate you coming and participating today. As you can see, they all have tables around the room, and after the DWR presentation, we will have staff at those tables to answer questions related to water. Could be utility billing kind of questions. Also, there's a lot of information regarding conservation, incentive programs, and those kinds of things. So you'll have time after the presentation to talk to those representatives at the respective tables for the municipalities. Water is very important, as I mentioned. We're very concerned about making sure we have enough water for our future. And I appreciate the cooperation from all the municipalities in that endeavor. And that's why we're here, is to collectively talk about particularly the Prescott AMA. So I'm very encouraged to have Natalie here with ADWR, who's going to cover the Prescott AMA. She's going to talk about Safe Yield 2025. Also talk about the management plan that they're working on right now, and the current one that we're in, I'm sure, as well as the aquifer, Little Chino Aquifer, among lots of other things. They also have some programs for conservation that she'll talk about as well. When she's done, then we'll take just a very short break, let people move around if they need to go to the restroom, and then we will allow folks to move to tables if you want to talk to those people at the respective tables, or Natalie will be right up front to answer questions as well. So thanks again for coming, and it's my pleasure to introduce Natalie Mast.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I do, before I get started, I want to introduce just a couple additional staff members that I have with me today who will be up at the ADWR table helping me answer questions. I have Nemesis Ortiz DeClet here, who is our Drought and Conservation Coordinator with ADWR, and I have Paul Alder, who is our Community Water Systems Coordinator. My name is Natalie Mast. I am the program manager working on the management plans at ADWR. We are going to be covering a lot of things today, and I'm going to move pretty quickly, but we, as Mayor said, we will be available to answer any questions afterward at the tables and around the room. So I'm going to be covering a lot of ground today. So I'll cover what exactly is the Prescott Active Management Area, talk a little bit about the types of data that ADWR collects and uses across the active management areas, talk about what is safe yield, how we calculate and analyze it across the active management areas. And then we'll also talk about the management plans and the mandatory conservation programs they contain, as well as some voluntary conservation programs that the department has available. In addition to that, I'm also going to talk about some activities and opportunities for public engagement. ADWR is doing a lot of work to plan for the future, and there's a lot of ways that individuals from across the state can get involved with those activities. So, getting started, we will talk first about what even is an active management area. So the active management areas were created by the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. This act was really a visionary thing at the time, the first of its kind of this sort of groundwater-focused management. So the idea of the Groundwater Management Act was to put in structures for groundwater management in this state, intending to curb the impacts of severe groundwater overdraft in many parts of the state. So Some of the regulatory structure that put into place can be seen on this slide. So this is not comprehensive in any way. There's a lot more details that we could go into talking about the details of that act. But you can see kind of the regulatory structure here in kind of its most basic form. So the structure here is additive, it's tiered. So there are certain requirements that apply statewide. So on a statewide basis, if you're gonna drill a well, you have to apply for a permit and register that well. There are additional requirements that apply inside our irrigation non-expansion areas, or INAs. Excuse me. Which, as the name implies, that includes a prohibition on expansion of irrigated acres in those areas. And in the active management areas, or the AMAs, like Prescott, we also have even more requirements, such as assured water supply requirements, and the existence of these mandatory conservation programs for the largest water users. So this is gonna be a little bit hard to see for those in the back, I apologize. But this is a map of the Prescott active management areas. We have 5 active management areas in the state: Prescott, Phoenix, Pinal, Tucson, and Santa Cruz. So the Prescott active management area covers the area you can see here. So it includes Prescott and Prescott Valley, but it does not include Mare or Cottonwood or Paulden. Those are outside the active management area. So a big part of ADWR's approach to groundwater management and water management in general across the state is focusing on data. And there are a number of different ways that we come at this. The first one I'm gonna talk about has to do with our Hydrology Division. So our Hydrology Division at ADWR covers a wide range of responsibilities. So one thing that they do is maintain groundwater models for each of our 5 active management areas, as well as several areas outside the active management areas. In addition to that, we also have a field services section that goes out into the field and does things like take well measurements or help with things like monitoring subsidence in fissures or, excuse me, or checking on some of our automated equipment that transmits water level data to us. So there's a broad range of data and data gathering activities that our Hydrology Division assists with. Some of that basic data information, so that field services staff that I mentioned measure depth to water in around 1,800 wells every single year throughout the state, not just in the active management areas. Those water level measurements are stored in a database that's publicly available on our website called GWSI, Groundwater Site Inventory. That database contains a ton of information and can, if you click on a specific well, can show you a chart of water levels over time and how they might change over time. Some of those well sites in our GWSI database are based on automated sites. So we have some sites that we go out and check manually on an annual basis, but we have some sites that are automated. So they may have a logger on the well site that automatically measures the depth to water, and we might just need to go out and download that information. Or some others have telemetry on them and, excuse me, and simply transmit that information directly to us rather than us needing to go directly and download it from the well itself. So we are working to kind of expand those automated and telemetry type systems to better improve our data collection efforts. In addition to those data collection efforts, ADWR's hydrology group also does a lot of analysis type work, including these types of water level change reports. I apologize that that's a little bit hard to see. The main idea that you can get from this map, it's actually important not to focus too granularly or too specifically on location in these maps. But the general idea, so what you can see here is that red dots indicate water level decline, blue dots indicate water level rise. So the size of the dot then indicates the magnitude of that rise or decline. So what you can see here on this map is that generally across the Prescott active management area, we are in most cases seeing water level declines over time. So again, it's important not to focus too specifically on specific sites here. Those kind of differences in the size of the dots, in where you might see some blue dots occasionally, it's more important to focus on the broader trend across the AMA rather than kind of trying to focus on the specific information. This is due to a lot of things. It could be to geophysical characteristics in a specific area, or it could just be due to the fact that real world data is messy. And sometimes we just need to look at broader trends rather than looking at some of this kind of messy individual data. So another part of the data that ADWR uses inside the active management areas is active management area annual reports. So large water users of non-exempt wells inside the active management areas, with some exceptions, are required to report water use to ADWR on an annual basis. So those water use reports include information about the types of water used, where that water is coming from, what type of use that water is going to, and that sort of thing. There may be additional information required associated with those reports. Those annual reports are then taken by ADWR staff and processed. So we put all that information into our database, we check on the data quality, we compile that information to each sector and to each active management area. This is a long, extensive process. There are a lot of water users across the state, so this takes us a while. And then that information, that compilation, is then used both in our statewide water use estimates that ADWR creates on an annual basis and in our regional groundwater models that I mentioned earlier. So the real reported pumping information from those active management area annual reports is then incorporated into those groundwater models that our Hydrology Division maintains. ADWR has been doing a lot of work in recent years to improve some of our data processes, to improve some of our data communication. So this active management areas data page that I have on the screen right now is one example of that. We are making a concerted effort to make more of our data publicly available in a compiled and accessible manner. So this AMA data page is maybe a year or two old now. We've had this for a little bit, and we are working to expand upon it and improve it. But the information from those compiled annual reports is posted here on an annual basis, and we've created a dashboard to help visualize some of that information over time and some of that information on an annual basis by sector and by water type. So all of this data feeds into some of the policy side of things also. So safe yield is the goal for the Prescott Active Management Area. We'll cover what that means in just a second. But all of this data, both the groundwater models, so we use that well level data and the annual report data, that all goes into our groundwater models. We also use the annual report data. Both of these things are pieces of data that we use to analyze safe yield. What is safe yield? So on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have the statute that references safe yield. So this is the statutory definition of safe yield that the department is required to use. So safe yield is a groundwater management goal which attempts to achieve and thereafter maintain a long-term balance between the annual amount of groundwater withdrawn in an active management area and the annual amount of natural and artificial recharge in the active management area. So the management goal of the Prescott AMA, as well as a couple of the other AMAs, is safe yield by 2025. So what is safe yield? We can read that definition, and in some ways it's both a little confusing and a little vague, but what we can pull out of that definition is that this goal is an attempts to achieve. So we attempt to achieve safe yield. This is not intended to be a punitive thing. This is something we are working incrementally toward. And another piece of this that we'll focus on is that we have both an annual amount of groundwater withdrawn as well as a long-term balance pieces in here. So we have to balance understanding this on an annual basis, calculating safe yield on an annual basis, as well as trying to consider how we might analyze it on a long-term basis and what long-term means in the context of safe yield. So something to note about safe yield is that it is kind of a hybrid of legal and physical characteristics. So safe yield should not be construed to be synonymous, completely synonymous with water levels. So some water that is underground is not legally classified as groundwater. When we store effluent underground, for example, in the Prescott AMA, that effluent retains its legal characteristic as effluent. And so when it is pumped, it is still categorized as effluent for ADWR's purposes. So we, in the context of safe yield, only count the groundwater that is legally classified as groundwater. And I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like. So in our annual calculation of safe yield, we kind of have two sides. The details here maybe aren't that important, but you can kind of see that there's inflows and outflows, and on both of those sides, there are natural and artificial components that we include as kind of the pluses and minuses of this calculation. So the pluses or the inflows might be natural recharge or incidental recharge, and the outflows are going to be things like groundwater pumping. So when we're looking at Prescott specifically, the characteristics of the AMA influence how the AMA might make progress toward its goal. So what you can see here, I apologize that this is a little bit small, a little bit hard to see. So on this left-hand side here, this chart shows the different sectors over time. So the orange there that you can see kind of increasing on the bottom, that is the municipal sector that you can see has grown over time in the Prescott Active Management Area, where the agricultural water use has declined over time in the Prescott Active Management Area. Total water use, though, with regards to this timeline, has actually remained relatively flat. On the right-hand side, so on these charts, we have water supply split out by those three sectors. So agricultural, municipal, and industrial. The yellow portion of the chart that you can see there, it represents groundwater. So most of the water supply for this active management area is groundwater. The purple at the top of the chart is reclaimed water, and this active management area has increased that reclaimed water supply over time. There's actually been a lot of investment in increasing that supply over time. So with regards to the two sides of that calculation that I showed you earlier, so this is what the two sides of that calculation look like if you take the pluses and you take the minuses and you match them up and chart it out on an annual basis. This is what it looks like. It's a little ugly. But what you can see here is that this is extremely variable year to year, and it's really hard to just look at this and identify, are there any trends here, or are we just seeing an extremely variable system? So one way we can start to better understand that is to actually look at the two sides of that calculation. So I still have that dark line showing the annual balance between withdrawals and inflows. So down on this chart is the inflows, up on this chart is the outflows. The blue bars are your inflows, the red bars are your outflows. What you can see here that is really unique to this active management area is that the inflows are highly variable. So you have some years of very significant flood recharge, but those in-between years are relatively low recharge years. Where in other active management areas, you're gonna see a lot more consistency year to year. Yes, there's gonna be variability, but it's not nearly to the degree that we see in Prescott. So what we see is that even though the outflows have been relatively consistent over time, it's really the inflows in this active management area that are driving overdraft in this active management area, the low inflow years. So, with regard to safe yield, so safe yield is the management goal for the Prescott active management area. The management plans are one of our most important tools for moving each AMA toward its goal. The management plans were created with that 1980 Groundwater Management Act that I mentioned at the very beginning. So the management plans also have a statutory structure. So the statute for the management plan indicates that each active management area should have a management plan, a series of 5 management plans, and that those plans should include mandatory conservation programs. And these programs are supposed to be designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. So that last line there, reduce withdrawals of groundwater, is kind of our guiding principle for the management plans, for the existing management plans, and also the development of the next management plans. And the mandatory conservation programs in there are all supposed to be designed around that principle. So we have 3 main sectors for which we have conservation programs in the management plans. So again, these are mandatory conservation programs for those kind of large water using sectors inside the active management areas. So we have a couple different types of programs for the agricultural sector. We have a base program that's kind of allotment based, and we have a best management practices program that is based on doing certain practices rather than having an allotment. The municipal conservation program also has a couple options, one being kind of a conservation target type program, gallons per capita per day, and one again being a best management practices type of program. And then the industrial program has some general requirements that all industrial users are supposed to use. And then we also have a number of different subsectors that our industrial conservation requirements break out into, including one for golf courses. So those conservation programs generally include a wide range of different requirements for those users. So it's regulatory requirements related to water use, it includes reporting requirements, it includes conservation targets and flexibility provisions for compliance with those conservation requirements. So again, those programs are designed to be moving toward reductions of withdrawals of groundwater. And that, again, is the tool that we have from reducing withdrawals of groundwater in order to move toward the goal of safe yield. In addition to the mandatory regulatory conservation programs that we have in the management plans, ADWR also has a lot of information and programs on voluntary conservation measures that individuals can take. So there are a number of free resources out there that can help you save water, and many cities offer rebates to help mitigate the costs of things like converting turf to xeriscape or purchasing high efficiency appliances. There are often free water conservation classes or xeriscape demonstration gardens available, and that kind of thing to help learn about some of these voluntary conservation measures that individuals can do. We do have a number of conservation materials available at our table that you all can come and look at after the meeting, and we do have both copies of some of these, and there are cards which indicate where they can be found online. Whoops. So I missed one. There we go. We also have a number of conservation websites available, both on ADWR's website. So ADWR has a specific conservation page with lots of resources, links, and other information about water conservation for the public, for kids, for landscaping, and for lots of different types of uses. In addition to that, we also have ADWR also built ArizonaWaterFacts.com, which is a really nicely done website containing some conservation information, but also information about water use and how our water use breaks down over time in the state. In addition to that, Water Use It Wisely is a regional water conservation campaign that was sponsored by a collaboration of many of Arizona's cities and towns and municipalities. And its website includes lots of tips and ideas on how to conserve water in easy and interesting ways, and ways that people can kind of participate in this culture of conservation. So a lot of water conservation resources are focused on outdoor use, and that's because up to 70% of water used in Arizona can be used outside. So things like plant selection can really influence how much water you use on a household basis. For example, turf and other high water use plants can use more than 3 times the water of other low water use types of plants. So we have a lot of information available about xeriscape type plants, plants that are low water use, plants that might require no watering or only minimal watering to use less water in your outdoors. As a part of the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, municipalities and other water users were required to plant low water use plants in medians and rights-of-ways. So these low water use plant lists were really intended as regulatory plant lists for those rights-of-ways, for those public areas, but they're also a really interesting resource when it comes to households and individuals who might want to adopt some of these low water use plants. They have become widely used by landscapers, developers, and municipalities that were just interested in reducing water use. So in addition to all of the things that I've covered, and I've covered a lot of things already, so thank you for your attention so far. I know I'm covering a lot of ground here. In addition to all of kind of these existing structures, all of these existing regulations, all of these existing conservation programs, ADWR is also doing a lot of work to plan for Arizona's water future, the next management plans, the next few decades, and into the next 100 years and beyond. When signing the drought contingency plan for the Colorado River earlier this year, Governor Ducey made this statement about, maybe I'll just read that for those of you in the back who might not be able to see this. So it says, as Arizona transitions to a drier future, we must continue to promote a culture of conservation, one that enables the unbeatable quality of life and boundless opportunity that we enjoy. So I've already talked a little bit about how many of these voluntary conservation measures really do encourage this culture of conservation that's so important in Arizona. But in addition to all of that, these regulatory programs and this additional planning that we're doing for the future is really a part of the tool set that we'll have for moving us into this drier future as we plan for Arizona's water future. So, whoops, sorry, I'll back up a little bit. Arizona has, for a long time, and starting really with that visionary 1980 Groundwater Management Act, we have been a leader in water management, and we are working hard to continue that tradition as we plan for the future. We do have a number of initiatives that I'll mention in the next few minutes that are initiatives planning for the future of Arizona's water supplies, as well as opportunities for engagement from the public and public participation. The first thing that I'm going to mention is not a new initiative. It's something that was, again, created by the 1980 Groundwater Management Act. So the Groundwater Users Advisory Council, there is a GUAC in each of the 5 active management areas, and the role of the GUACs is to advise on water issues across the active management area. So we have a couple Prescott GUAC members here today. I won't call them out, but these are public meetings. These are covering a broad range of issues across the AMA, and they include discussions of grant funds for conservation across the AMA as well. So each of the active management areas, each GUAC consists of 5 members. There's currently 1 vacant position for the Prescott AMA. These members are governor appointed, and they serve 6-year terms. The GUACs are responsible for basically providing a local perspective to ADWR on the active management area issues. So advising the ADWR director and the AMA director, making recommendations on groundwater management programs, commenting on management plans as they're, before they are promulgated or legally adopted. And then also making recommendations on funding projects. So part of the withdrawal fees in the active management areas supports a conservation fund called the Water Management Assistance Program. Excuse me. And the GUAC discusses and makes recommendations on each water management assistance project inside that active management area. The Water Management Assistance Program provides technical and financial resources for the purpose of conservation programs, augmentation, and other types of research regarding water use, water availability, and hydrologic conditions. Typically, the Water Management Assistance Program funds come from withdrawal fees, but occasionally there are other things that might augment those funds. And I already talked about how GUAC members will make recommendations on funding individual projects, but they also make recommendations on what those withdrawal fees are for the active management areas, so they kind of help set the amount that might be available for these conservation funds in a given year. Recent projects that were funded in the Prescott Active Management area include a pilot rainwater harvesting project, stream flow monitoring, and a fourth management plan brochure and Prescott Active Management Area brochure. We have some copies of that here today. It turned out really nice. So I've mentioned the management plans here a number of times. So under that management plan statute, we talked about there's supposed to be a series of 5 management plans for each active management area. The 4th management plans were originally intended to run from 2000 to 2010. For many, many reasons, the department is behind on those management plans. Prescott and Tucson have already adopted their 4th management plan, so you all are up to speed. But Phoenix, Pinal, and Santa Cruz have not yet adopted their 4th management plans. In those active management areas, the 3rd management plans remain in effect. So ADWR is actively working to complete those 3 remaining 4th management plans. We intend to complete the legal adoption process for those remaining 4th management plans by the end of next year. So we're working on a pretty aggressive timeline for adopting those. At the same time, we are also working to begin the stakeholder outreach and development process for the 5th management plans. So we created, that's a little hard to see, apologies. We've created the management plans work group to be an ADWR-led stakeholder forum for the development of the 5th management plans. So this work group was created, we had our first meeting in July, and so we're going to be working to gather information to consider things related to the 5th management plans. So right now we are working to quantitatively, analytically assess the existing conservation programs in the 4th management plans, and then use that data analysis to update existing management strategies, as well as to develop new management strategies to take us into that 5th management plan and beyond. In the initial meetings of the management plans work group, we did split up into a couple subgroups because there is a lot of topics and a lot of ground that these management plans cover. So we split up into 4 subgroups, 1 for each sector, so ag, municipal, and industrial, and also a safe yield technical group. So that safe yield technical group, I talked a lot about safe yield today, that safe yield technical group is going to continue considering that calculation that I showed earlier. Are we using the right data sources for each of those components? Are we considering long-term on appropriate scale? Are we analyzing the long-term trends and influences in an appropriate way? Our goal for that group is really to do a better job of communicating safe yield, the status of each AMA, and kind of standardizing as much as we can how it is that we analyze and communicate safe yield from year to year. The other subgroups will be focusing on the individual conservation programs in each of those sectors. So the 5th management plans work group is discussing issues for all 5 AMAs, but since there is an individual plan for each of those AMAs, we might also further down the line customize and tweak those programs that we come up with under the work group to better fit the needs of each active management area. In addition to those 4 subgroups, we also created a turf breakout group. to more specifically address some of the specific issues related to turf, specifically golf courses, parks, those types of things. So our timeline for the 5th management plans can be seen here. Again, we're kind of right at the beginning of this process, and what we're hoping will be a really collaborative and informative, public engaged process. So right now we're kind of in the program analysis stage that you can see in that first line there, and we'll shortly here be moving into kind of the program development stage. We intend to take 2021 to do a lot of the drafting work that will go into these documents, and we hope to conduct the promulgation process or the legal adoption process for each of these plans, for all 5 5th management plans, in 2022, which means that the conservation programs contained in those plans would be effective on January 1st, 2025. All of these meetings, I skipped over a piece here. So we are having another meeting of the Management Plans Work Group on December 4th. We have another meeting of the Agricultural Subgroup on Monday, on November 18th. All of these meetings are open to the public. They are open to anyone who would like to participate and help contribute to the development of these programs and strategies moving us into the 5th management plan. Meeting information is available on ADWR's website, and all of these meetings are also available via webinar if you don't want to drive all the way down to Phoenix to attend a meeting. So, yes, so you can, if you're interested in receiving email information about any of these meetings, you can email managementplans@azwater.gov, and I don't actually have anything that's written down on, so I apologize for that. But you can ask to be added to our meeting notification list and also to receive that webinar information for each of those meetings. In addition to all of the work that's going on with the management plans, ADWR is also doing a lot of work with the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council. So this council was formed by executive order by Governor Ducey. Also, when he was signing the drought contingency plan, he also signed this executive order. So the council's goal is to investigate long-term augmentation and strategies for conservation and innovation in the pursuit of more sustainable water supplies for Arizona. This council is chaired by the ADWR director, Tom Bushatsky, and includes 38 members appointed by the governor, including 4 legislators. So previous iterations of this group did not include legislators, and that was something that we really saw as something missing. So in this iteration of the group, legislators are included because a lot of the strategies and policies that we discuss in these types of groups will need to, in order to be enacted, would require some statutory change. So that was a significant change for this version of the council, was to make sure that there was inclusion of the legislature. The council meets quarterly at ADWR in Phoenix, and similarly to the Management Plans Work Group, all meetings are open to the public. These meetings, the meeting information for these is also posted online. They do have webinars available, and ADWR provides staff support and provides web space and that type of thing for this council and its committees. There are 4 active committees under this council. So again, lots of things going on. The post-2025 Inside the AMAs committee is tasked with identifying water management challenges facing the active management areas and propose strategies to address them. So our statutes for the active management areas don't have a lot of framework after 2025. We had a series of 5 management plans that were to extend through 2025. The 5th management plan remains in effect after 2025, but there's no structure for a 6th management plan, for example, or some other thing that would come after that 5th management plan. So that's kind of the task of this post-2025 group, is to figure out what comes next for the active management areas. Additionally, there is a groundwater committee that focuses outside the AMAs, identifying challenges in those rural non-AMA areas. We also have a desalination committee that is largely focusing on potential locations for brackish groundwater desalination, and a long-term water augmentation committee that is tasked with considering big picture ideas for augmentation for the state. Oops, I must not have saved that version. So again, all of this meeting information is available on our website. I think we have meetings on the calendar, and I meant to include those here, and I think I saved the wrong version of this presentation onto my USB drive, so I apologize that I don't have those dates here. But all of those meeting dates are available on our website. I believe there are dates on the calendar for each of the main committees here. The full council will be meeting again on December 3rd at ADWR, and again, that is available via webinar. So, like I said, we do have lots of things going on. There are a lot of ways to participate. There are a lot of ways to learn and be engaged and provide input on this next generation of water policy, these updates to the conservation programs that I covered. We do have a ton of information on ADWR's website, so please do dig around on there. There's a lot of really valuable information there. And with that, I would just like to thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention today. We have some great materials and information around the room, and I would be glad to take any questions from the audience at the table afterwards.